Well, good evening everyone, and thank you for being here on this rather cold Sydney night. Thank you for being here for this Sydney launch of Cataract Kids. Cataract Kids was formally launched in Melbourne, and it's a matter of interest, I'm sure, to some people here tonight that this launch is happening in Sydney when there's an event happening in Melbourne that's of some interest to people from New South Wales and Queensland tonight. I'm sure we'll hear more about that as the evening goes on. My name's Greg Lee, and I'm Director of RIDBC Rennick Centre, and it's really a pleasure to be able to welcome you here tonight on behalf of RIDBC and the Rennick Centre. RIDBC Rennick Centre is the Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children's Centre for Professional Education and Research that's operated in affiliation with our partners, Macquarie University. And it really is a pleasure to welcome you here tonight on behalf of RIDBC, because I would say that we really are fellow travellers in the reasons that Cataract Kids was established. That being to enhance the support and information provided to families, to work with clinicians to optimise treatment outcomes, and particularly to link researchers to improve the flow of information to people who are engaged and associated with cataract. These are ambitions that are held by RIDBC in regard to the field of vision impairment more broadly, and specifically, I would argue, by the Rennick Centre in our efforts to improve the vision-related outcomes and associated life outcomes for children with vision impairment, including, of course, children with cataract. The work that we do here at the Rennick Centre in the area of vision impairments made possible by the great staff that we have working here. And I want to acknowledge tonight in particular the work of my colleague Sue Silvera, whose interests and work intersect in so many ways with the aims of Cataract Kids. I know that Sue shares in and is committed to the ambitions of this group, and I'm delighted that she's able to be as involved as she is and as supportive as she is of this organisation in her role and efforts as a director. I also want to acknowledge tonight the presence of Greg Johnson. Greg's the CEO of Essilor Vision Foundation. The Essilor Foundation, as many of you will know, donate aphakic glasses to all children in Australia with cataract. And it really is a pleasure to have you here tonight, Greg. Welcome, and thank you for the Foundation's amazing support for children with cataract and for your support for Cataract Kids. It really is extraordinary, and it's a great pleasure to have you here. Finally, on this rather chilly Sydney night, I'd like to bid a warm welcome to Megan Prichter, who for most of you I'm sure needs no introduction at all. In a day job, Megan's a research fellow at the University of Melbourne, at the Melbourne Law School, but importantly, of course, from tonight's perspective, is the parent of a child with cataract and the founding director of Cataract Kids. And it really is my pleasure tonight on behalf of you all to welcome Megan and to invite her to get tonight's proceedings underway.
Thank you so much, Greg, for that kind introduction, and to the Royal Institute for hosting this evening's event. Just a few housekeeping things. There is a great children's room next door. Parents, please feel free to come and go as you need to. We are also live streaming this event on our YouTube channel. A warm welcome to our online audience tonight. For those who are here and who use Twitter, we have a Twitter hashtag. Feel free to tweet. We want to get the word out in as many ways as possible. I also wanted to pass on that we've received very warm wishes for tonight's event from the Parents of Vision Impaired Kids in New Zealand, a great organisation which sent a beautiful message to us tonight. So my name is Megan Prichter, and I'm the founding director of Cataract Kids Australia, and I'm absolutely delighted to see so many people here this evening. As Greg said, Cataract Kids Australia is established to bring together children and their families who are affected by childhood cataract as well as health professionals, researchers and service providers. And for that reason, I've asked several people who are leaders in that field in different ways to share their expertise with us. And I'm so pleased that we have tonight as speakers Dr. Trent Sandercoe, an ophthalmologist, Louise Brennan, an orthoptist with many years' experience in looking after children and their families affected by cataract, Dr. Michael O'Connor, a stem cell researcher from Western Sydney University, and Sue Silvera, an orthoptist and also a researcher from here at RIDVC. And I do want to acknowledge that Sue has been absolutely instrumental in bringing tonight's event together. But first I want to tell you about how and why Cataract Kids Australia came about and what we hope for its future. This is in part a personal story, and I'm sharing it because I think that stories have a lot of power and impact. And I think it's in weaving together the stories of our kids and ourselves on this cataract journey that we can make sense of our situation and also see clearly how we might want things to change. So I've got 3 kids. The youngest is our 4-year-old son Leo, who in this picture is at the optometrist having a contact lens put in a couple of years ago now. So although I was born with cataracts myself, they don't have a major impact on my vision. They were never removed. I never knew much about the condition except that I had it. And I didn't know that it could be inherited. Neither of my older children have any vision problems. So when an ultrasound when I was pregnant with Leo discovered a cataract, this was just entirely by accident. A specialist ultrasound a week later identified a cataract in his other eye as well. For my husband and I, this was really shocking and scary. We had a lot of time in the pregnancy then to worry about what else might be wrong. But at least we had time to get organised and to plan for the surgery that would likely follow soon after his birth. People around us who were well-meaning and very kind told us what I now call the great aunt stories about age-related cataract surgery. And everyone, of course, knows someone who's had this procedure. We heard a lot about how simple and quick and effective it is. And we felt then, but we couldn't really articulate, that our son's situation was very different. Like many parents, we turned to the internet for advice. The information we did manage to find seemed scattered, targeted to doctors, and really difficult to understand. Terms like aphakia, strabismus, IOL, they're not easy. Like many parents, we struggled with handing over decision-making, placing trust in the clinicians because we really couldn't make sense of the information before us. But at least we knew he was in excellent hands, and we are very grateful to the Royal Children's Hospital team and to Leo's optometry clinic, who have supported us so magnificently over the past 4 years. We thought that getting through that first surgery when our baby boy was 9 weeks old was going to be the toughest thing. That view really changed when contact lenses came into our lives. I will never forget the first night at home, trying to get the lenses out ourselves. Here was our precious baby screaming the house down. My husband and I were in tears as well. It took 30 minutes to get the lenses out. Our older girls had sensibly retreated to their rooms, cranked up the music, put the headphones on so as not to have to listen. And when it was over, they came out of their rooms, and I always remember one of them said, "Do you mean we have to do this every night for a whole week?" No, honey, not a week. A long time. I don't know. We spent long hours at the hospital with our little baby, often having to phone our older daughter to say, "Sorry, we're held up again. You'll have to miss choir or basketball." That impact on siblings, which is common to every family where one child has a health issue, was something we felt and continue to feel very deeply. Generally, though, things have gone really well for us. We know just how lucky we are. Our son has mostly avoided complications, and he seems to be able to see pretty well. We've got into a good routine with the contact lenses, and we very much count our blessings. But it was as I talked to other families on internet support groups that just how lucky we are became more apparent, because a lot of families aren't doing so well. and this is despite the amazing, high quality, passionate and committed care provided by health professionals and support staff. Recently I collected some of these experiences of parents, which will show on the slides. They do make for quite challenging reading. Parents struggle with a lot of things. Children with cataract may need multiple surgeries in the first couple of years of life and several examinations under general anaesthetic. Sometimes there are adverse events during surgery. Some of our kids unfortunately go on to develop glaucoma. Patching, particularly for unilateral cataract kids, can be very, very difficult, with some parents resorting to medieval-looking arm immobilisers to stop their toddler ripping the patch off over and over again. Travelling long distances for treatment, not really knowing what might happen next, wondering and worrying about the long-term outcomes. Will my child be able to drive? Parents struggle with contact lenses that fall out and irritate or glasses that won't stay on. And we wonder too why treatment choices seem to differ so much. Why is this child in hard lenses, this one in soft lenses, another one in glasses, and another one with IOLs implanted at a young age? Am I traumatising my child too much by having to hold her down to get the lenses out, in and out each day? Some people feel so isolated and really lack information. One mum I met of a 1-year-old spent much of her day on the floor looking for her son's contact lens, which fell out several times each hour. This obviously had a really negative impact upon her stress levels, her relationships and her finances, as she hadn't been able to return to work. And she had no idea, before she connected with other parents, that this wasn't normal. She just thought that's what her life was now. So it was from these stories, these really powerful stories, and my own many questions about research, information and treatment choices, that Cataract Kids Australia was born. Our organisation has a threefold vision. One is about families and builds on the fantastic work that's being done by health professionals and clinics to support their clients. We aim to provide high quality, clear, evidence-based information that's tailored to the Australian healthcare context. To this end, our main achievement, of which I'm very proud, has been setting up the website cataractkids.org.au, which contains information about surgery and lens management, links to resources and support, and also stories from families about their journey with a cataract kid. We want to be a voice of evidence and reason in the face of conflicting information and sometimes, unfortunately, quack treatments that are peddled online. And we also want to be shaped by what parents need, whether that be more face-to-face events like this, written information, clearer information about current research, or other things. We want to be a leader in advocating for families and raising awareness about this condition in the wider community. The second part of Cataract Kids is about clinical care, and this is really a longer term goal, to act as a focal point around which the different eye care professions can gather for those who work in connection with childhood cataract, to make it easier for clinicians to know about the resources and support that they can recommend to families, and to ask where you as clinicians need more training, more support, more research, and see what we can do to help fill those gaps. Which leads me to our third element, research. We want to shine a light on the fantastic research that's being done into childhood cataract, but we also want to be able to speak about where more research is needed. Did you know, for instance, that there's actually no up-to-date data on how many kids are born each year in Australia with cataract? We don't know much about the patterns of how and when children are diagnosed, and Sue Silvera will speak more about this. Our involvement with Dr. Michael O'Connor at Western Sydney University, who I'm delighted is speaking here tonight, has shown that there is a real value in partnerships and conversations between scientists and affected patients and families. We very much want you to be involved. You can help us more in a number of ways. First, we want to be shaped by the needs of children and families, clinicians and researchers. So please get in touch and tell us where you want more information and resources. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook or sign up for our online newsletter. We're also now on Instagram, thanks to my 16-year-old daughter. Also, we encourage you to consider making a tax-deductible donation to support our work. As a new charity, we could really use your help. There is a donations box on the table tonight. And a credit card form as well, or donations can be made online through our website at any time. We are registered as a charity in Australia, so we tick all those quality assurance boxes for you. Donations help us to maintain our website, to run events like this, to develop resources for families, and we hope in time to directly fund new research and professional education activities that will ultimately improve care for kids affected by cataract. So as I said, I am absolutely delighted at the interest you've shown by joining us tonight. I promise I didn't know about the football when we chose the date. I'm very, very excited to see where this is going to lead. Thank you very much. So as promised, we have a great lineup of speakers tonight, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Trent Sandico, who's hoofed it back from Canberra in a real hurry to make it on time for the launch tonight. Trent is a paediatric and general ophthalmologist, and many of the families here tonight I'm sure will know him or know of him. Trent has appointments at Westmead Children's Hospital, Sydney Eye Hospital, Liverpool Hospital and Canberra Hospital, and Trent will speak on the clinical path for children and their parents. Thanks, Trent.
Thanks for having me. I was pretty chuffed when someone asked me to do this. It's probably one of the most challenging areas of paediatric ophthalmology is congenital cataracts or cataracts in general. That's because doctor, patient, family, you go on a journey. And it's a long path, and each path is different for every child, whether they have cataracts in both eyes, whether they have a cataract in one eye, whether they have a cataract that is significant or is not significant. So when I was first thought about this talk, I was thinking about what was the pathway of a kid. So first is the diagnosis, which is often done by a paediatrician or a general practitioner. And then we've got the workup. Now you can see that I've put up there, the workup's in purple and sort of extends over through the surgery and beyond into the post-operative care. The surgery itself is pretty quick and simple, but it's pretty stressful for everyone involved. And the great amount of time and effort for families, parents, and everyone involved in the care occurs afterward. And that is irrespective of how old this child is. Whether they're born with cataracts, or whether they're 1 year old, whether they're 2 year old, or whether they're got a cataract at the age of 5 or 6. So when a child comes to see me, I ask a couple of questions that are in my head. Is the cataract in one and both eyes? At what age did this child have a cataract? Is it at birth? Is it happening before one, which is often a congenital cataract that has become significant, or that has happened after one? These all impacts on choice of surgery you're going to have, treatments, options, and visual rehabilitation. The next question I ask myself, is this cataract going to affect this child's eye? And believe it or not, you can see up there from that photo, there's a boy from my rooms. He presented to me when he was 6. He had pretty poor vision, but with a set of glasses and some patching, he could probably drive with that eye later on in life, which is surprising. I thought he wasn't going to get there. And what makes us determine what we're going to do with, or what the course is for a child, is what type of cataract it is. Can we see the back of the eye? If we can't see the back of the eye, your child's not going to see out to see us, and that's going to affect their vision. And often that can help with us with what type of cataract is and where it's positioned. Just from the long-term data, we know if a certain cataract looks a certain way, we don't need to do anything. Next question I have to ask myself and have to explain to the parents, is your child going to benefit from surgery? Some children, if we do surgery on them, all they're going to get is an operation. And sometimes we need to make a hard decision with a child with a cataract that the best thing for that child and their eye is to leave it alone. It is rare, but it does occur. And the other next important thing is if the child has cataracts in both eyes, is it important? Are we missing something? There's something else going on apart from that's going to affect your child's long-term health and well-being that we need to sort out before we put them through surgery. So when I was talking about workup, we want to work out as if there's an underlying cause, and in the same process, that's preparing that child for surgery. Putting a child through a surgery anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks old, or even a little bit older in some kids, is stressful and has significant risk. So you want to rule out everything and make sure that child's going to be safe. Generally, kids with cataracts in one eye, they're spontaneous and they don't need to be worked up on most occasions, which is good. And it's probably the most common presentation we see cataract in one eye. But still, often if we can't see the back of the eye, the next step is for any parent that needs to go through that is doing an ultrasound to make sure the back of the eye is fine. And again, to make sure if we have an eye that is not structurally normal and we can pick that straight away, that we're not going to put your child through a general anaesthetic and not do the surgery. That is rare again, but it's important. And then of course we often get a paediatric exam to make sure they're safe for surgery. It's important to get out the cataracts, but recently I had a child who came from Perth that I operated on, and he had a fistula. And that pretty much limited the time. We had 3 days to do his cataract. And because after that, once he had his fistula repaired, he could not go back in and get intubated or have anything else for the next 4 to 6 weeks. If a child has cataracts in both eyes, then we always ask ourselves a question: is this a metabolic or a underlying health issue that we want to sort out beforehand? And I think it's important to tell parents that as well, because if it also means you're going to have other challenges on top of that. Generally, most of this is sorted out with blood tests. You see a geneticist, and then we often examine other members of the family, because sometimes the clue to what is going on comes from looking at mum, looking at dad, looking at the other kids. I have a couple of families where one child has bilateral significant cataracts, and we look through the rest of the family, they've all got cataracts, and she's just the unlucky one. Getting the answers for kids that have bilateral cataracts takes months. It involves genetic tests, which takes months. Getting to see a geneticist takes months. Some of the blood tests will come back straight away, and the important ones will come back pretty quickly. But not all of them do. And so it's one more thing that parents have to juggle, along with everything else that's going on as the child's getting ready for surgery. So what is the cause of cataracts? Look, there's so many causes. If you I just opened up my textbook and the list went for 2 pages. And most kids that are congenital or under 1, they're often, I think most congenital cataracts are in kids. If it's unilateral, it's often spontaneous, as I mentioned before, but in kids that are under 1, it's, we got to search for problems. So we do some blood tests for possible infections during pregnancy, which often come back negative. Other causes like hormones or enzymes, and that's going to be something that's going to affect that child for life, and that's why we test them for it. But often the tests sometimes are done on the day we're doing surgery, because it's hard to get blood from a neonate. Sometimes it could be involved in things like syndromes, so like a Down syndrome child, or trisomy 21, which is the appropriate term to use for that. Or they can have an abnormally formed eye, which I'll talk about later on. It could be inherited from mum and dad. But the most common cause we find is idiopathic, meaning that we don't know. We're uncertain. And then once a kid is over 1, we often see at the kids' hospital kids that have gone through trauma. It can be secondary to, they're on drugs or drops for other treatments, ongoing inflammation throughout the body or within the eye, and occasionally tumours. And so when we see the child with a cataract, mum and dad's thinking, it's about the cataract, and we think the broader picture. Do all cataracts need surgery? I mentioned this before, not all of them do. The ones that we operate on are the ones that are going to stop normal visual development in an eye. And that's anything that we can't see the back of. Down the bottom now, I've just got 2 ultrasounds. One of a child that came into me. You can see on your right hand side there, it looks like a fairly normal eye. You can see the lens, which is here. And on the other side, we've got what looks like a very abnormally structured eye. And that's an eye that taking out the cataract in that eye is probably not going to be of any benefit to the child. Next to that is a 14-year-old boy that sees me, and that's his cataract. He sees quite well with a pair of glasses on. He's managed to avoid surgery. We get a good view of the back of his eye. So occasionally these kids' cataracts get picked up very, very late. And in a unilateral cataract, so cataract on one eye, if it's picked up pretty late, sometimes it's not going to be a great benefit to do the surgery. Parents are often keen to do it, and we will often do it, but I think the understanding is we've missed the boat. Some kids, all they require is some monitoring, some glasses to make sure the cataracts don't get worse. And some kids have cataracts which are really good at the beginning, and then later on they become significant and we have to do surgery. So why do we take out the cataracts in kids? Between the age of 0 and 8, the eye and brain are making connections which set up vision for life. And that is dependent upon there being a clear vision or picture on the back of the eye. There's 2 critical parts of this. One is the first 6 months of life, and often I tend personally think it's the first 2 months after they open their eyes. The second part is 6 months. So if you've got a child that's got congenital cataracts, then doing the surgery early is important, because we start that process or try to get it back to normal. Once a child's over 6 months, we've got a little bit more leeway. If a child's over 1, you've got a little bit more leeway. But most congenital cataracts need to be removed at somewhere between 4 to 6 to 8, and even I've done 10 to 12-week-old children. Ideally, we like to do it in somewhere between the 5, 6, 7, 8 week mark. And this is because this is when the eyes start to open and the process of visual development occurs. Kids that are older, so a kid that has a cataract that's 1 or 2, we've got a little bit of leeway, but we still give it great priority because they can still develop the lazy eye or amblyopia. So when I was talking about this talk, if I gave this talk 5 years ago, we could not give you a direct answer, what is the best surgery for your child. It would be, this is what works best in my hands. Then recently there was a study which was done over the United States, because the infant aphakia treatment study, and they had looked at kids that were under 7 months old that had cataracts, and they operated on them, and they randomised them to having a lens put in the eye and not having a lens put in the eye. And the kids that didn't have a lens put in their eye had to have a cataract, had to have a contact lens afterwards, and they followed them over 5 years. And what this study showed, and what's important, is that both kids, whether had a lens in their eye or had a contact lens to correct them, they all had about the same vision, meaning the spread of vision was the same, the average vision was the same. But the kids that we put a lens in, they had 1.5 times more likely to have a postoperative problem, whether that be glaucoma or other problems, which led to 3.5 times more likely to have an operation. And why is this important? Because when people talk to it, they say, is it just like is my child's cataract to be like my grandma's cataract? We just put in a lens. And so it's a different talk now. Before we would say, oh, we're not quite sure. Now we have got good, strong data. There is a few exceptions to this rule, and there'll be some kids that no matter what we do, we take one look at and we understand that they're not going to be able to tolerate a contact lens, and we might have to take the risk with that. But that's up to the doctor and the parents together to make that decision. But in general, really young kids that are under the age of 1, we do not put a lens in anymore. But if they're over 1, we do. So what does surgery involve? So I try to break surgery up to explain it to parents so they can understand what's going on. So you can see on your left-hand side here, there's a cross-section of the eye. And you can see where I've highlighted the lens, and in the middle of that is the black cataract. And behind that is what we call the vitreous. And surrounding that lens is what we call a capsule, and these things are important. If a child is under 1, what we do is we remove the front end of that capsule, take out the cataract, remove out the back end of the capsule, and then take some of the jelly behind it. And then we use a thick glasses or contact lens. Now, if it's a unilateral cataract, they've pretty much got a contact lens, so cataract in one eye. If they're in both eyes, we try and use contact lenses, but sometimes we use glasses. If a child is over the age of 1, then we can put an artificial lens in there and let it sit there and give them some vision. Then we often use glasses to focus the image at the back of the eye so that child can have normal development. What this whole process relies upon is that everything else at the back of the eye is normal. Unfortunately, sometimes we get in there, we do the surgery, everything goes well, and we look at the back of the eye and there's something else that's going to stop a child from seeing as well as we would have liked them to. And then they've still got another 7 years of visual development, which we have to patch and treat their lazy eye, get the glasses right to get good vision. And not all kids get good vision, but they get some vision, which is better than no vision. So the post-operative care management of a child with cataracts, the immediate post-op period is quite intense. The child often stays in, if they're quite young, they'll stay in hospital overnight. And then we start an awful drop regime. And there's lots of drops in the first 4 to 6 weeks of life. And during that time, there's lots of visits to the clinic. And that's to look at all the possible complications, to make sure things are going well, to get them set up for a set of contact lenses or glasses, to get them in to start the patching. And all this is not necessarily done by a doctor, it's done by the orthoptist. And often, most of this is often done in conjunction with a tertiary hospital or paediatric outpatient clinic. And I must say, we rely at Westmead Kids Hospital on our wonderful orthoptic department, who we pretty much just hand the child over to them and say, this is the refraction, can you give them a contact lens, and spend a lot of time getting a contact lens in and teaching them how to do it. Every child will have a different pathway to getting good, or trying to get good vision in their eye. This includes, needing bifocals. So as the kids get older, the need to see up close is lost when we take out that initial lens. We pretty much do turn them into grammar and needing something like a pair of readers up closer. We also have to treat and screen these kids for complications like glaucoma, or what we call return of the cataract. And what you can see down the bottom there is, on the left-hand side here, is where I've done a little bit of laser on one of my children, who we put a lens in. She was 2 when I put took out a cataract, and then she had a return of it, and we did a bit of laser on there. On the other side, you can see another boy who's a patient of mine, and he's got a very small opening on that eye from his initial surgery, which was done overseas. He sees quite well, but at some point in time, I suspect we're going to have to try and get someone to open that up so we can get a good look at the back of his eye. Most kids will get some form of amblyopia which will require patching, whether they've got bilateral cataracts or unilateral cataracts. And it's a tough ask for parents because it's days, or almost feels like half a lifetime of patching. If later on, if we haven't put a cataract or put a lens in, we do talk about doing it, but that's, again, something, each case is different for every child. And some kids, when they get a lazy eye, they get a cross-eyed or get other problems and then need to go back for surgery. I just hope when we get to the end of all this, that it's probably a benefit for parents that are about to go through cataract surgery. And probably every other parent that's been here has been through this pathway and is somewhere along that point of post-operative care and visual rehabilitation. It's tough. It's tough. These kids, they're tough to deal with. It's tough. They walk into the room, they spread their arms, mum sort of feed him through the door. We know that, everyone knows that. We're here to help you, and we understand the difficulties that you're going through. Any questions? Yep.
I always wanted to know, my daughter has just one cataract.
Yep.
initially, which possibly is cruelty is the only reason, but why can't you just cover up the other eye without the cataract and then go, now you've got no vision, until you do the surgery and put the contact lens in, and then...
That's not unusual. Some people do that. Some people don't. Literally yesterday, I had a 4-year-old come into my rooms at Carlingford here, and they're 4 days old. I'm going to have a look at them in 4 weeks, and we're going to probably talk about dilating that eye and patching it to the other eye to get some visual stimulus in it. But it's such a big difference. When you take out a child's lens, it's the reason why people want to put an artificial lens is that child goes to having a thick, very thick set of glasses. So if they've got, trying to ask a child to see out of one eye or one pair of thick glasses, the magnification is different. And that's what...
Because when they're born and they have the cataract in one eye,
yep.
So they're not seeing out of that eye, and they're seeing out of one, and then the difficulty is they're not seeing, even though they're taking the lens.
So once the eye opens, the visual process or the process of developing, making the vision develop, starts. So if there's a cataract there, you're not getting that image to the back of the eye, that's not starting. You can patch it up to a certain point in time, but then there's a point, if you keep that eye patched, that child would have bilateral poor vision in both eyes because you've created what we call sensory deprivation amblyopia, meaning what the cataract is doing to the eye with the cataract and the eye that is normal, you're stopping the picture getting back to the eye and developing. Does that make sense? Sort of. The best way to think is it starts, the reason why we start 6 to 8, the eye's open, we've got to try and get a clear image at the back of the eye. If you don't have an image at the back of the eye that's clear, then you cannot make connections between the eye and the brain to see well for life. And that's why kids that have bilateral cataracts that we pick up late, they have wobbly eyes called nystagmus, and that is, that's what we're trying to avoid.
So our next speaker is Louise Brennan. There she is. Louise is a paediatric orthoptist who has a senior clinical role in the orthoptic and ophthalmology departments at the Children's Hospital at Westmead. Louise has a keen interest and extensive experience in working with aphakic children and their families. Oops. And tonight, I've jumped the shark. Tonight we are thrilled that she is sharing her top tips from all this great experience. Top tips for families of cataract kids. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you, Megan. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to speak at the launch of Cataract Kids. It's always a privilege for me to work with the families of kids with cataracts. I think it's because it's probably one of the hardest things I do in my day-to-day job, but it's the most rewarding of the relationships that I build with families over not just the 8 years of the active treatment for amblyopia, but we still keep seeing these kids at Kids Hospital until they're well into their young adulthood. I can still remember, I think every time when I go to do a new contact lens teach, I booked another one today for 2 weeks' time, then there's another one coming in 3 weeks. So every time I know that I have to do one, I actually put myself in a way in the parent's shoes, because I can still very, very clearly remember the boy that was my first cataract kid, who was the first contact lens teach solo. He's now 23, but I remember I'd watched, I think, 2 contact lens teachers with the other orthoptists, and then I looked in my diary one day and it was written down, contact lens teach. I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to do this by myself. So I always take myself back to that point in time. I think I'd like to just spend a moment speaking about emotional well-being. It's very, and Megan sort of touched on it as well, it's a very normal thing to go through this big emotional roller coaster, and I think all the families I've worked with, a lot of the time, they, in the initial time, yes, we have, there's shock with the diagnosis, and there's grief. There's also anger. There's anger that something wasn't picked up earlier. We see kids that didn't get the red reflex test, or it wasn't performed properly, or it was missed. And I think then they are told, by the ophthalmology team that your visual prognosis is not going to be that great because it was a bit of a late pickup. So we have to go through all the emotions and trying to, grieve, and then sort of plan ahead and work out what we are in fact going to do to treat these children. the other thing that's important is with the families. The family dynamic is very important. So if the baby is first time parent versus is it the fourth baby, is there other kids in the family that have had cataracts? Even little things like has mum or dad worn contacts themselves or not? Is there separation and divorce within the family, or is there other stresses? So all these things lead to either maybe how well the contact lens teacher might go or how difficult it might be, and just the whole journey as a whole. It's important that we seek support, and we look in lots of different places for support. So I've worked with families that, some of our families live 8 hours from our hospital, and that's the closest care that they can get, and others live 10 minutes down the road. So it's quite a different journey for those families. And some have a very close-knit family group, and they've got lots of family around them to support them, and others are quite isolated. So I think we need to seek support wherever we can and try to encourage parents to do so. You never know who's living next door. You can have a next door neighbour, and I often offer that to parents. I say, is there someone that's close to you, a next door neighbour or someone in your mother's group that wears contact lenses? They might be able to come along to the teach-in and help out. And also be really, really kind to yourself, and make sure that you look after yourself in particularly those early weeks of trying to learn how to put the contact lens in and out. So the most important thing when looking after the developing vision in a child is to correct the refractive error. And the first thing that will happen is the removal of the cloudy lens. As Trent alluded to, sometimes the cataract may be left in place, and then we would still do glasses and patching probably, but most often the cataract in its congenital form will be removed. And management does change over time, so we have to be flexible in the different options. So not only does the contact lens refractive power changes, so it's really important to attend regular appointments, because not only the shape and the fit of the lens will change, but the refractive power of the lens will also change. And it's really important to have that up to date, so you're maximising the vision potential of that eye. And amblyopia, as Trent said, tough. I think I used tough a couple of times in this talk, but that's all I can say. It's really, really tough. It's a hard time for the child, for the health professionals, and for the family treating amblyopia. With my experience at Children's Hospital, we use soft contact lenses. I know around the rest of the country, particularly in Melbourne, they use hard contact lenses, and optometry services are used. Our experience at Children's Hospital Westmead is that we do the fitting of the lenses and prescribing the lenses ourselves, and we're lucky enough to have Gelflex Australia support us in this, and they provide the lenses to us. They're a soft contact lens. They are 71% water. That's an important thing to consider, that they are very high water content lens, which makes them comfortable to wear, but they also dry out very quickly. So lubrication is really, really important. And for some parents that have been calling me, particularly over the last couple of weeks as this weather has changed, with babies with red eyes from the contact lenses, if they can up the lubricants to every hour, it does make a really big difference. And I know that's a pain, I know it's horrible, but it does seem to work. Weekly wear if possible. The other benefit of a soft contact lens is that with the high water content is that they can be worn for a week at a time, and that's if possible. Some kids just can't tolerate that, so I would suggest if the eye's starting to look a little bit red by day 3 or day 4, that's when you might take it out, give the eye rest, do a full clean, and then try again. But a lot of our children are on the weekly wear lens. We do use Aosept solution, which is a hydrogen peroxide based system. That is the safest by far to use in babies, and my understanding is Children's Hospital has been using that for about 30 years. The other things we need to look at is technique. Technique changes, so the 2 photos up the top there, there's the technique that probably I would use the most would be the one on the left, tucking the contact lens up under the top eyelid and just gently feeding it up, and then pulling the bottom lid down, and then releasing the bottom lid to sort of capture the lens. Some people find they might go from the side, Some people might find it's easier to try popping in when baby's asleep. There's lots of different techniques, but the technique will also change over time. So the technique used on a 4-week-old baby or 6-week-old baby compared to a 3-year-old might dramatic differently. It might really change, and you could even find, we can do the sitting on top of the child technique. So there's lots of different things that we need to do. Problems of lens wear, it's the same in adults. You do get dry eyes, you can get keratitis and all sorts of nasty problems. So it's really important that we keep to our appointments and make sure that the cornea is checked regularly. Aphakic glasses, I feel, have had a bit of a bad rap. And yes, they can be difficult, and yes, they can be heavy, and yes, they can restrict the field of vision. But they are a fantastic backup, whether it's bilateral or unilateral. And I do have a few kids from over the years that have got 6/12 each eye with their visual acuity from wearing aphakic glasses from day one. And for reasons that they never were going to go into contacts. Mum had vision impairment because she had congenital cataract and she's legally blind. Dad was a farmer and had massive fingers, so he couldn't learn how to do it, and all the teenage siblings said, yuck, I'm not doing that. So we do have a few good cases of kids that have visually done very well, and they don't have nystagmus, but they have been wearing their glasses well on the bilateral cases from day one. They are also a great backup for the unilateral cases, so thanks to Greg Johnson and his foundation, some of the kids, are using those that we will order the lens strength for both eyes, and they will be wearing them with intensive patching on days or weeks or months when for some reason they can't wear their contact lens. We're looking at occlusion therapy. Yeah, it's a really tough job, but it is very worthwhile, and we do again get good vision outcomes from the most diligent of parents. And the unilateral cases, we tend to still prescribe, if possible, half waking hours. So it is a long time to be patching and, watching if a contact lens doesn't fall out, and then watching that your child's not ripping off the patch. And I don't know how anyone holds down any kind of paid employment while they're trying to look after a child doing this, because I think it would be near impossible, all the monitoring that these wonderful parents have to do. Up the top, don't forget about mittens. So I've had a few parents ring me the last couple of weeks as well with little babies that have been rubbing out their contact lens or trying to pull their patch off, and I've just suggested old school, and we go back to wearing a little pair of mittens, and they've rung me and said, it's working, the lens is staying in or the patch is staying on. So that's a little tip. Also the arm splints in the car. If you can't watch the baby that's rubbing their eye in the car seat, put some arm splints on. If you want some, come and see me, I'll get some for you. Sounds cruel, but if it means that you're not going to be losing a lens every time you hop in the car, then it might be worthwhile trying as well. And just ask your orthoptist or your ophthalmologist and try everything. So stimulating vision, I'd highly recommend, and I'm sure everyone here has done these things, but be really creative and adaptive. So really look at what the vision of your child is. And you can ask your orthoptist, what is their level of vision and what kind of toy should I be using? And just don't put a patch on and sort of expect them to see and say, well, they're not really looking at anything. I would be really looking at what their vision level is, wrapping tinsel around their play gym, putting black and white pages on the cot, the sides of the cot. Maybe take them off if you want them to go to sleep, but during daytime maybe pop them up. Maybe pop the patch on and do some work in the dark room with some light up toys. Just stimulate that vision however you can, and use any hours that you have and multitask. I think parents are very good at multitasking, so just pop baby in the high chair, again arm splints on, put a really loud colourful TV show on, and use some tinsel. So the last few handy hints that I have: spare lenses. I don't know if anyone here might hold the record for how many lenses you've lost in a week. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Anyone might have. I've heard up to about 10 lenses in 1 week have been lost, so that's a lot. Try to get a couple of spare lenses, but try not to order too many. So if you order too many, and then Murphy's Law is that the refraction's going to change that next week, and then you're stuck with a whole lot of lenses that you might not need. Really try to keep to your appointments, as everyone does. If you miss an appointment for any reason, please, at the hospital, give us a call and we will do our best to squeeze you, and it's really important that we see these kids in a timely fashion. Sleep time, again, mittens can help, particularly if you think that your baby is rubbing their contact lens out when they're asleep. Sleep time's also good to maybe in those early months, maybe trying to pop the contact lens in while they're asleep. Heating, this time of year, I think the air conditioning turns up, and that's when the lenses are drying out quite a lot, so just try to think about the lubrication of the contact lens. Bath time, try to avoid soap and splashes in the eyes, but still kids should be able to have a fun bath time. I think that's important. Swimming, we have a definite no swimming lesson policy while wearing a contact lens. Parents will often think it's because the lens might fall out if the child goes underwater, and can they wear goggles? It is nasty, nasty germs in those public pools. So I would definitely recommend, if your child is doing swimming lessons, that they might take their lens out on Tuesday night and go swimming lessons Wednesday morning and then pop it back in again the next day. Flying as well, the same thing with just maybe leave it out for the flight, because cabins are very, very drying on contact lenses. And if you can at all, try to get your baby into the habit of wearing sunglasses when they're quite young. It can be a real struggle. Some kids just don't like anything on their head, hats or sunglasses, but they can get in the habit pretty young. It's a really good habit to get into, because it will help you with your holiday time and family time at the park when they're wearing contact lenses. Thank you.
Next, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Michael O'Connor, Research Senior Lecturer from Western Sydney University. Michael uses human pluripotent stem cells to model eye diseases, including cataract. He received his PhD in regenerative medicine from the University of Sydney, did postdoctoral studies in Vancouver, and is now back here in Sydney. And you may know of Michael's very exciting work in eye lenses through a major ABC News story that also involved the Myatt family, who are here this evening. Please welcome Michael.
So it's a real pleasure to be here this evening. I'd like to thank you all for turning out, and to Megan and Sue and the RADBC for organising and hosting the event. What I'm going to talk to you tonight about is very experimental, but it's something that excites me, and I hope you enjoy the content. So to make sure we're all starting from the same understanding, I'll run through some information that you're probably all very familiar with, but then we build on it as we go along. So on the left-hand side here, you see a young girl, and her body is made up of distinct parts. So we've got organs that have multiple tissues, and each tissue has different types of cells. And if you take a look at the bottom right-hand corner, we have just a cartoon diagram of the cell. And the important parts of the cell, we have the membrane on the outside that keeps everything in. We have a watery fluid inside, and we have the nucleus that contains the DNA. And most of you, probably all of you, have heard about DNA. It contains the building blocks of what the cell does and what it becomes. So the cells then are pretty much like the bricks that you can see at the back of the room there. They're the content of what keeps the body as the body. So with that starting point, I'm hopefully going to show you a really quick video that describes stem cells. So cells are the building blocks of the body, but stem cells are a special type of cell, and we're going to hear about that in just a moment. Just bear with me for the first 10 seconds or so. It's built for a different audience, but we then get into the more interesting content.
So stem cells are the building blocks of the body. They can create a copy of themselves and also make all the other cells that the tissues in our bodies need. They help us grow and stay healthy, and can help the body recover from many illnesses and injuries. Is that how it works?
Yes, that's it. And in the laboratory, scientists are beginning to understand how we can be maintained as stem cells. If the conditions are right, we can divide again and again, making many copies of ourselves, and each copy can give rise to the cells the body needs. That's called being able to self-renew. Scientists are also learning how we can be encouraged to differentiate into other cells. That means to make the types of cells needed to repair an injury or diseased area. As this research continues, eventually it might even be possible to regrow an entire organ outside the body.
So the two basic properties of a stem cell then, the ability to self-renew, make copies of themselves, and the ability to differentiate or become the specialised parts of the body. So in my work, I use a type of stem cell called a pluripotent stem cell. That's just a fancy name for saying that it can become any type of a cell in the body. My research group studies eye diseases, and as we saw on Trent's diagrams, here is just a cartoon showing where the lens is situated in the eye. So we have an image on the outside, the flower, the light's being reflected off it, going through the cornea, then through the lens, which is the oval shape with the red line around the outside, and the image is going onto the back of the eye. So the lens, like any other tissue in the body, is made up of cells, and there's two really distinct types of cells in the lens. You can see on the right hand side you've got the red oval around the tissue, that's a capsule that's keeping the lens in place. And on the right hand side of it, the side that's closest to the outside of the eye, you have this cobblestone of small square cells. And they're called the lens epithelial cell. What they do is they make the lens fibre cells. And if you have a look in the middle diagram, you can see all these long lines. So the lens is really made up of very long, very thin cells that are packed together in shells, a bit like an onion. And the epithelial cells are the ones that produce those fibre cells, and those fibre cells then act like the glass in glasses. They focus the light onto the back of the eye. So as you know, when a cataract forms, you can get cataract in different locations, in the centre of the lens that stops the light from going back to the retina, or you could get it on the edges. When a cataract forms, vision is impaired. And there are about 82 million people around the world, about 180,000 people in Australia who have low vision. And there are about 20 million globally who are blind, and about 60,000 in Australia who are blind due to cataract. And there are about 314,000 new cases of childhood cataract that arise every year around the world. So we have a large number of people that are affected. And as you all know, childhood cataract the effects of it can last a lifetime. So lots of surgeries done in adults, that's the figure that you see there, 180,000. Lots of money is spent on those adult cataracts, over $300 million a year. In childhood cataract, the outcomes can be suboptimal despite the best of care. So we really need to delay adult cataract and find better treatments for childhood cataract. And that's where my lab is aimed at. So we have difficulties getting human lenses for research. If you want to know how things are going wrong in the body, you need to ask, well, here's the body part, let's study it. It's really difficult to get human lens tissue to do that. So my group wants to use stem cells to try and make lenses and understand how cataract occurs and how we might stop it. So here on the little left-hand cartoon on the left-hand side, we have the blue circles are our stem cells, so they can self-renew, it can make a copy of itself, or it can become a lens cell, and that's what we see as the black circle there. So quite a few years down into one sentence, we found a way of using our stem cells to make pure populations of human lens epithelial cells. So the cobblestone cells that sit on the front of the lens, we can now make them tens of millions of them. One single person can quite easily make tens of millions of these cells in the laboratory. And this picture here, where you see a cobblestone area, that's an example of the lens epithelial cells that we make. So what we found was that if we take them and we make them into a little ball, and we try and give them an environment that might reflect what is happening when the eye develops, we get on the top left there, the picture is a ball that's relatively clear, and if you look underneath it, you can see a really bright spot of light. Right? That micro lens is what we call them, is focusing light, doing the job that a lens should do. But if you look on the top right-hand side, that's a micro lens that we made from our stem cells. We put a drug in the environment that stem cell was, or that micro lens was growing in, and that drug stops the micro lens from becoming transparent. And if you look underneath it, the dark circle that you see there, it stopped the micro lens from focusing light. So we have this system now where we can make tens of millions of lens cells. We can use those to make functional, light-focusing human lenses in the laboratory, and we can add drugs to the system to stop the focusing effect either before it happens or even after it happens. We can form these types of cataract. So one of the things that my group is doing at the moment is using these stem cell-derived lens cells and microlenses to try and understand, well, what are the causes for adult cataract, diabetic cataract, smoking-related cataract, UV-related cataract, age-related cataract. People know what the endpoint of those particular forms of cataract are, but they don't know how they start. So one of the things that we're doing is looking at those very early starting changes that occur in a lens to see if we can intervene and perhaps find a drug that delays these types of cataract. And we're also looking to test anti-cataract drugs. Many of you will have heard about posterior capsular opacification or secondary cataract, that children often need to have laser surgery to fix vision for. We're looking at trying to find drugs that stops that type of cataract. But the final thing that I'd like to talk to you about is, might we be able to change the way that cataract surgery is done in children? And this is not just my idea, this is one I've been working towards for about 20 years now, but there are other groups around the world who have similar but slightly different ideas. So as Trent mentioned, here on the bottom left-hand side, we see the red circle around some lens cells. So this is a cartoon of what happens in a child or even in an adult cataract surgery. So you can see the red circle has been broken and a lot of the cells are gone. So that's what happens in the cataract surgery. They make a circular incision and they pull away the front part of the capsule with the epithelial cells on it, and then they take out all the lens fibers from there. That's why you don't see them here. And eventually they'll implant the intraocular lens. So there was a joint group between the US and China who thought, well, perhaps if we leave most of the epithelial cells there, instead of taking them all away, perhaps they might be able to regrow a lens. So this was work that was published probably about close to 2 years ago now, where instead of making that very large incision, they've made a very small one. As you can see towards the top, there's a cell that's missing as an indication that they've only made a very small hole, left most of the epithelial cells. And then they asked, so this was a clinical trial that happened in China, they asked, would the lens regrow from these lens epithelial cells? And so from the top right in A, they're just telling you that they had 45 patients that came into the hospital. 8 of them were excluded because there was a family history of eye disease. They then allocated the children into either you're going to get the standard treatment or you're going to get this new type of surgery. And in C and D underneath, you can see some patient images where they've scanned from the outside what the lens looks like as it regrows within the child patients. So at 3 months, where those arrowheads are pointing, you can see a little bit of grey material suggesting that maybe some lens is regrowing. And then at 6 months, you can see the grey material is a lot bigger, suggesting that some type of lens has regrown within that particular patient. And those patients were done a few years ago, and they had improved vision for a period of time. Some of them have since developed cataract. So this leads to the idea that perhaps lens regeneration might be possible as a cataract treatment, particularly for child cataract patients. It's not suitable for all childhood cataract patients because you might know that mutations that cause some types of childhood cataract are in the DNA. The DNA is in the cells. If you just leave the cells there and they regrow the lens is quite likely to have the same type of cataract problem. So my group is thinking, well, if we can use stem cells to make millions of human lens cells that look like the lens cells in our bodies, perhaps we can transplant them into a child's eye at the first surgery and use them to regrow a lens. And if they don't have the mutation to start with, you would predict that the lens that regrows would not have a cataract. And if that worked, we would be testing to see whether whether the lens grows with the patient, with the child patient, so that you don't have to have the follow-up surgeries as the child's eye grows, and we'd be checking to see whether the cataract wouldn't regrow. So that's the idea that we're working towards. I have to say this is all very experimental. We're nowhere near putting this idea into practice in patients yet, but it's something that keeps us going. So thanks for listening. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Michael. I'm just going to keep you here for 1 second because we had an online question that I think you might be interested in, or possibly also Trent. And this comes up quite a lot on the parent support groups about they've heard of eye drops that can dissolve cataracts. So perhaps you could comment on stuff that's kind of circulating around the internet, or are you happy to answer that?
I can help you from the research side.
Yeah,
From the research side. Trent probably
Trent,
from the clinical side.
Briefly, because this comes up a lot. Thank you.
Sure. So as a research academic, I don't know of any drugs that are able to dissolve a cataract. I know that there were some publications in the last 18 months or so, 2 years ago actually, talking about drugs that have worked in animal models of cataract, and they're hoping to progress those towards human trials. Those human trials haven't started as far as I'm aware. So from the research perspective, there's a couple of drugs that may eventually get tested in humans, but there's nothing that I'm aware of that will dissolve a cataract.
And just to reiterate what Michael says, look, at this point in time we're not aware of anything, and before it goes to be done in a child, we'll need to go through adults. Generally, we try everything out on adults before we try on our children. That's because we're dealing with a developing system, and everything changes rapidly in kids the first couple of years. So generally what we find in medicine, what's done in the adult, generally in pediatrics, lags a good 10 to 15 years behind. I just would be caution of the hope that gives you, because I would suggest it's a long way off, and that shouldn't be thought of in any way as an alternative to what is the standard of care at the moment.
Okay, so we're with our final speaker, Sue Silvera, and I'm conscious of the time, so we're going to whip through. So thank you for your patience, but I think you'll all agree this has been a fantastic series of talks, so thank you all again. So Sue Silvera is our final speaker. Sue is also, I'm so grateful, a director of Cataract Kids Australia. She's a paediatric orthoptist who's in an academic position here at the Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children. And Sue also manages the Australian Childhood Vision Impairment Register project. And if you're a parent of a kid with bilateral cataracts, please find out more about this vision impairment register. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a few thank yous before I briefly speak with you about my topic. So many people have helped put tonight together. First of all, thank you very much to Professor Greg Lee for his wonderful opening, and also for the Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children for hosting the event. It's a fantastic location, and it's really wonderful to have you all here. So thank you, Greg, and also RIWC. And of course to our dear Megan, who is the real hero in the room, really. She's just one of us. She started this up. She's passionate, as you can hear. We wouldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for Megan, and I think we all owe you an enormous debt of gratitude. So thank you for your passion and your frustration and everything else that drives you. It's really amazing. Thank you to our other speakers. You can hear there's some very skilled health professionals looking after your children. There's an amazing researcher who's offered you some information tonight that I keep telling Michael how amazing his research it is, and he's very humble about it all, but it really, maybe in 20 years' time we'll be having a different discussion with families. That's how exciting that research is. Thanks to Jackie and Carla for their help. Jackie's behind the scenes feeding your children and keeping them amused, so thank you very much, and also for Carla for her amazing technical skills. Kathy and Rosa have also been helping out tonight, other colleagues of mine. Thank you to Olivia, Lou's gorgeous daughter, who's come along tonight, who's keeping the kids amused, and also to our wonderful greeters, Lara, Amy, Caitlin and Sydney, and their mums who've been standing out in the cold welcoming you all in tonight. So thank you, everybody. You've all made a difference to this evening. So this is just briefly about a project that I feel really passionate about, that Megan and I are trying to get some funding for. And time again we hear from people, gee, we wish we'd been able to pick up this cataract earlier and act on it earlier. So an easy title, sooner rather than later, how can we get better at detecting congenital cataract? So we know that we've got this period of visual development, and as Trent really pointed out beautifully tonight, it's a race against time. We do need to pick up these kids as early as we can and start our intervention as early as we can to get the best outlook. We know children's vision develops till they're about 8 to 10 years of age, but we also know that if we're trying to treat things that late on, we're not going to have the impact that we could have as younger children. And we also know that lots of people look at our children's eyes. So family are doing it all the time, parents are doing it, siblings are doing it, GPs are doing it. Even our dear group of child and family health nurses are watching over our children's eyes all the time. We also hear back from families that they were suspicious for a period of time and nobody listened to them. And that's the sort of information that we need to take on board. Lou also mentioned that we have a really good way of detecting what looks like signs of cataracts in children. This is called the red reflex test. As clinicians, we know to use this, but a lot of the people that are around our children, like GPs and child and family health nurses, need better training in implementing this test. So what we're hoping is that we can come up with some funding, and we've had a couple of tries at some grants already, and we have unfortunately been unsuccessful, but we're not deterred. We'll keep applying. We're hoping to develop a training webinar that can hang off the Cataract Kids Australia website that will help train health professionals to be better detectors of signs of cataract in children. So when a parent comes in and says one eye looks a little bit funny, that health professional knows what to do straight away and to get that referral going. So hopefully we'll have that sort of outcome. And we certainly want to upskill as many professionals as possible. So the idea is that this will be a really short, sharp training webinar that sits on the website. It will be there for free. Everybody can access it. So that's one of the projects that we're thinking of hopefully being able to fund. So I guess the message from all of us tonight, whether we are researchers or health professionals, is that we do try and walk with our families. We're all very passionate about your children. We're passionate about their visual development, and we absolutely want the best outcome for everybody. And I think, as Lou has really brought home to us, that we do get the trials and tribulations. We know we send you home with some impossible tasks, but we play a part in it. But if it wasn't for you guys, your children wouldn't end up with the wonderful outcome that they're having. So well done, families. One other group of people to thank tonight are your beautiful children. Look how well behaved they've been. We haven't heard a peep from anybody. So good on your parents, you're doing something right. Or maybe they're all in a sugar coma around the corner, I'm not sure. But Megan's going to come up and just end the official part of the evening for us. So again, welcome. It's lovely to have you with us. Please stay and enjoy some nibbles. And again, thank you to everybody that has made tonight possible. Thanks very much.
I'm just going to wrap up with some very quick thank yous to all of our speakers. Really so grateful that you've given your time and your expertise to share with us this evening. And I very much echo Sue's thanks to this organisation for hosting and for a whole bunch of wonderful people who've pitched in. I've got a whole other list of people to thank who helped me set up Cataract Kids, and I won't name them all, but their names are going up on the screen now. I couldn't have done this by myself, and as you can see, I had a lot of helpers.